Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Electricity Association's Conversation Series. My name is Dave McHenry. I'm Senior Fellow here at the CEA. The CEA has been working with our corporate partners to develop the Conversation Series, which focuses on solutions to current and future challenges faced by our industry. Today, IBM Canada will be presenting Resilient Contact Centers in the time of COVID-19. Our presenter is Rob Dunlop, Associate Partner, and you'll be interested to know that we have a number of utilities joining us from across the country today. COVID-19 is putting pressure on call centers. Many utilities are struggling with call center work from home options and have limited capabilities to service customers through digital channels. In this webinar, IBM will share how utilities can alleviate this pressure while transforming their customer care. So before we get started, we'd ask that you please feel free to ask any questions you may have into the question area on your webinar screen, and we'll ask those questions at the end of the webinar. We'll also be sending out a copy of today's presentation along with a post-webinar survey, and we certainly appreciate your feedback. And we're also interested in any topics that you'd like to hear as part of this conversation series. With that, Rob, we'll now turn the webinar over to you. Rob, maybe just your audio, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Okay. No,
thank you, David. And it's a real pleasure to be here to talk to you today about resilient contact centers in the time of COVID-19. I hope you can all hear and see me well, and that you're all doing well wherever you are in this this new pandemic reality of ours. So to get us started, a brief introduction on me. As David was mentioning, I'm an associate partner with IBM Canada. I lead a consulting practice in our consulting team that's called Cognitive Analytics and focuses on different technologies, especially exponential technologies, artificial intelligence and data science, and how they apply to industry today. But prior to taking on this role, I spent a number of years in our contact center practice, leading design and implementation and managed services of large contact center solutions. So this is a space that I'm very passionate about, and certainly a space that I have been very interested in seeing how it has transformed and changed over the last 6-7 months since we really started to feel the effects of the pandemic. So today, what we're going to discuss is strategies, solutions, and other topics that come into play in terms of building resilient contact centers that, as opposed to handling COVID-19 pandemic conditions, will really thrive in them. I'm going to present some common challenges for contact centers just to baseline us all with a common understanding. I'll talk briefly about the impact of COVID-19 on contact centers. Then I'll deep dive into resilient strategies and solutions, as I mentioned, and discuss how these technologies, while being obviously a part of the response to the pandemic, will allow organizations to leapfrog to the future and be better empowered as contact centers and as businesses moving forward post-pandemic and throughout as long as the pandemic will last for us. And then at the end, as David mentioned, we'll be taking questions and answers. Keen to take those questions and answer any questions that you have. So first, to formalize or kind of lay a foundation of traditional contact center understanding. And I'm assuming for our audience that you all have a fairly broad as well as deep understanding of contact centers, but just to ground us, traditional contact centers generally have a few specific challenges that they are dealing with in their day-to-day business. And this is irrespective of industries, but certainly reflective of electricity specifically, and more broadly utilities. So first is growing customer expectations. We have a general concept or way of understanding at IBM that says your last best impression kind of becomes your minimum expectation for every impression that is going forward as a customer. So customers are experiencing lots of innovative technologies with lots of different organizations. That's directly impacting how they perceive they should be receiving services from an electricity provider. That's extremely important. It means that there's an explosion of messaging and channels that they would like to receive these services on. Customers are more educated than they've ever been before. They have the expectation that you're going to know a great deal about them. That's kind of the customer of one expectation. And obviously they're increasingly digital. So these customer expectations are evolving, but in conjunction with that, we continue to have the traditional challenges in the contact center associated with agents. That may involve high churn, and it certainly does in most industries. It includes a general higher inquiry complexity. Over the years, it's not as though services get simpler for organizations. In fact, they tend to get slightly more complex. So the job of an agent becomes more and more sophisticated, and also the systems with which they provide their service and act as agents also become more complicated. So there are pressures from an agent perspective as well. And then finally, most organizations still see a contact center as a cost center. And so there's continuous management pressure to reduce the carrying capacity, or reduce the carrying cost, I should say. There's a high degree of management oversight, and obviously that's very KPI oriented, and pressure to do more with customers on less expensive channels and drive costs down. When we look at contact centers, there's a wide variety of levers that you can use in transforming the contact center. This is not specific to COVID-19. This is more generally, and I've taken a smattering of them here. This isn't exhaustive, but provided them on the slide before you. You can redesign and leverage technology for processes, for customer journeys and experience. A lot of that may happen in digital channels, but it also has a very direct impact on contact centers. You can leverage artificial intelligence technology to transform how your contact center is performing. You can impact some of your more traditional contact center technologies, such as routing or call distribution, whatever they might be. Obviously, multi-channel servicing and the propagation of your services across multi-channel is extremely important now with clients expecting it. There's a wide variety of agent and other types of employee tools that are leveraged to perform contact center transformation as well as day-to-day work. There's the general concept of cloud migration in contact centers, which is an area that I'm going to spend some time on today. There's how contact centers engage in sales as well as servicing, and it's important to see the two as important parts of obviously the contact center operation, but at times dealing with different phenomenon. And then finally, there is how you actually ensure quality for your contact center. So different types of call analytics, quality assurance, whatever it might be in order to actually deliver contact center experience. So all of these levers are levers that existed before COVID-19, but they're levers that carry a different amount of power and potential as we move into the new COVID-19 reality. So what has COVID-19, not COVID-10, COVID-19 meant for contact centers? And many of you or any of you who are in contact centers today will recognize these, but any of you that aren't necessarily will recognize these also as being very intuitive and ones that you may frankly have experienced as a caller. So first of all, COVID-19 across companies and industries has generated higher call volumes. More people are calling in because for one reason or for another, their daily life conditions and their interaction with their service provider, it's changed. Their reality has changed. And so that generates a general increase in volume. One area that is less applicable to utilities generally, but is still very important for general contact centers is also that there's no more in-person customer servicing, especially when we're in conditions of lockdown. And so any types of customer interaction that would have traditionally taken place in person or in a less isolated manner are now being shifted over to the contact center, further exacerbating the larger volumes that they're experiencing. Business conduct and business continuity has also presented a challenge for contact centers. Traditionally, contact centers are co-located individuals that are all breathing the same air, that are all sharing the same space. And so migrating call center agents to a work from home reality or a remotely distributed reality or any variety of trying to create some level of isolation among agents has also been an important challenge for contact centers and something that's had to be mitigated. And these challenges have taken place while everything else has stayed the same. The same expectations from a security perspective, the same expectations from a customer servicing perspective, in fact, sometimes even higher because we may be offering more accommodations to customers than whenever we have before. And so the challenges, have to still meet the minimum expectations of a well-run contact center. And so the objective essentially of these different strategies is how do we increase capacity of the contact center? That's going to allow us to mitigate, obviously, the volumes and also allow us to properly serve our customers just generally. How do we maintain that high degree of customer service? And how do we guarantee different types of outcomes? And as I take you through this story today, I'm going to actually talk about impacts to whether it's wait times, average handle time, greater self-service, whatever it might be, the different types of impacts or metrics that you would use to analyze the success of different types of initiatives. So this is the COVID context, and I'm going to dive into this in more detail with you. And as we do that, I also want to reinforce something. So when we generally think about the contact center as opposed to the call center, and we think about channel proliferation, and we think about how the contact center has been evolving really over the last decade, is towards this concept of an engagement hub. And I'm sure many of you have heard this concept before. Basically, the premise is we want to have a unifying technology as well as a unifying process and way of conducting business and business architecture, et cetera, for servicing our customers in an assisted manner on digital channels, whether that be over the phone, whether that be over social media, whether that be over mobile or web applications that then they're having to escalate to the contact center. All of these different customers or people coming in with different interactions are going to be coming in across these channels, and we want to be able to ensure that we can serve them in a scalable way, in a way that ensures that we have consistency of service across channels, et cetera. And so that's really the reason for the cognitive hub, or the enterprise hub, as you see in front of you, which is actually taking in all these engagements and servicing them out appropriately. Now, the key to ensuring COVID-19 resiliency in the context of the hub is specifically leveraging exponential technologies. And there's a really important reason for that. At the end of the day, when someone comes in on social media, on a mobile application, through live chat, when they call in, et cetera, usually we end up with one person talking to one person if they're getting assisted service. And that, frankly, is not a scalable model. And it also means that when more people have to interact with agents, we're going to end up having a challenge meeting that demand with any way other than providing more agents. And so the crux of this COVID-19 resiliency is really about leveraging exponential technologies to take that one-to-one relationship and change that to be a one-to-many relationship, depending on the type of interaction. And so you can see the technologies in the bottom left-hand corner that I was referring to a couple of slides ago. There are specific ones that exist from that toolbox of capabilities within the contact center that are specifically best able to provide that greater scalability and exponential capability to extend the contact center. And here are a few of the highlights. So resiliency, these are technologies that are actually going to deliver that resiliency, and they're going to challenge the traditional contact center growth and service model, which, as I mentioned, is a one-to-one interaction between an agent and a customer. And I know that there's a lot of words here. I'm not necessarily going to stick to the words. I'm actually going to provide a little bit of perspective for each of these. And then for some specific examples here, I'm going to dive into more detail with you as you go through them. But first, and also as the content's going to be left with you, I'll go through these at a high level. The first area, and I'm sure every single person on this call has heard about chatbots or different types of bots that are servicing interactions. That is a really powerful tool for serving customers, serving employees, and serving other groups of individuals in an automated way to provide convenient, high-quality customer service and deflect volume from the agents themselves. This is an area that isn't brand new. It's been in production with lots of different organizations for a number of years now, but it's still an area where, from a Canadian marketplace perspective, as well as more generally, there isn't an extremely high degree of adoption. I'm not going to go too much into that story specifically, but I'll weave it in, and we're going to spend some dedicated time talking about the proliferation of bots, but they offer a really, really high quality opportunity to moving from this traditional model into more of an exponential model. Intelligent routing and overflow is also a really powerful tool, especially in the context of COVID-19. What we've seen in COVID-19 from both a utilities perspective as well as from a municipalities perspective and financial institutions, et cetera, is that with COVID-19, all of a sudden there's this whole new swath of interaction types that weren't expected beforehand. For example, asking questions about how your service may or may not change, or how your access to it may or may not change based on COVID-19. And so those new questions that are generated are a totally separate group of interactions from your traditional, for example, I want to move my service from one address to another. And so recognizing those two different types of interactions and being able to intelligently route customers to those different services based on that and serve them differently provides you with a more flexible contact center management framework that can allow you to be more resilient in the face of change. Asynchronous versus synchronous messaging. This is an area that's still really emerging as we see organizations move to serve more of their customers over chat than they historically had over voice. That represents, even if it's synchronous chat, which means real-time chat back and forth between two individuals, represents a potential gain of significant capacity over voice, because theoretically an agent can handle multiple chats at the same time. And there are lots of best practices that are involved in ensuring that that is actually done successfully, that you don't result in too much fatigue on behalf of agents, and also that the customer service is high. But if done well, you can significantly increase the capacity of a contact center. In addition to that, moving from synchronous messaging to asynchronous messaging, and what I mean by asynchronous means if I'm a customer and I'm messaging you as an organization, you don't necessarily get back to me right away. You may get back to me 3-4 minutes, 20 minutes hence. You can drive even more customer expectation. And what we need to recognize in this space is that us all as consumers, this is a communication method that we've become comfortable with. You know, this is how we communicate with one another over text message. This is how we communicate with one another over a variety of social media platforms. And so asynchronous messaging is something that customers are now quite comfortable with. By applying that to contact centers, you have a significant opportunity for savings growth as well. Now, when we talk about other channels, all organizations generally maintaining obviously a phone-based call center as a component of their contact center, but organizations are also choosing what additional channels do they want to engage their customers on. Obviously, web is a major one. That may simply be for self-service. It may also include live chat. Mobile applications are becoming more and more prevalent for organizations, or at least responsive web, of course, on your mobile phone. And then organizations are trying to decide, okay, well, out of the social media channels and myriad of other channels that could be served by our brand, where do we want to live? And the general consensus when we look at channels now, and this has been evolving really over the last 5 years as channels have exploded, is that there are value-based channels and there are impression-based channels. What I mean by that is value-based channels are the channels that you actually want to attract your customers to so that they engage with you on those channels because they're high fidelity, high function channels. Impression-based channels, on the other hand, are the channels where people will interact with your brand. They're generally high visibility channels, so you need to be there. A good example is Twitter, for example, or Facebook. However, because of the nature of the channel and because of the sheer number of users that come into that channel for servicing being low, you don't necessarily want to service users there. So instead of focusing on servicing users on those impression-based channels, you seek to certainly address their impression, answer them publicly, for example, if they have a question or if they have a complaint especially, but you try and direct them to your value-based channels to ensure that you are supporting them well. Creating and maintaining your top agent is an extremely important component of being resilient in COVID-19. This is for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is the better your agents are, the more they're going to be able to handle adversity. And your agents are obviously going to be better through agent training and through ongoing coaching, but also by giving them the appropriate tools to ensure that they are as efficient and as well supported as they could be. And so there are a variety of technologies that exist within the agent and employee support space that are really critical. Agent assist technologies, knowledge management technologies, et cetera, that support your contact center in becoming more resilient as well. We have, as an extension to the agent support technologies, also the concept of hybrid AI. And that means, how can we create AI technologies or other types of autonomous technology that are in the middle of a call or in the middle of an activity for a back office employee, for example, these hybrid AI technologies are going to support those agents in delivering and actually performing their work. So whether that is executing a back-end process that would take time for an agent to wrap up, whether that's collecting information at the outset of an engagement or at the outset of, for example, a live chat, to ensure that when the interaction gets to an agent, it's as populated as possible. That's another really powerful way of interacting with customers. Or we're even starting to see in this space an agent supervised model of interaction of AI and customer. And that's a really, really interesting development as well. A major change that we've been seeing kind of coincident with COVID-19 and other challenges has been also a movement from hardware to software for a wide swath of contact center technologies. And I don't mean this in terms of your average call distribution. Obviously, that's something that for probably every single organization represented on the call, it's been software for a while. But what I mean more by that is things like software-defined networking, or the ability to subscribe to contact center technologies in an as-a-service model in order to add capabilities and only pay for what you get. And so cloud contact centers are a really interesting way that this space is changing and evolving and providing more and more flexibility to organizations, especially during COVID-19. And what I'll do in a few slides from now is I'll talk about specifically what organizations have done and what they're continuing to do to adapt to the COVID-19 conditions. And then finally, iterative contact center evolution. And so what this means is as technology changes through contact center as a service technologies, through AI capabilities, and also just through the maturation of the contact center space, what we end up having is more of these component capabilities that we can bring together in a hybrid cloud architecture in order to deliver them as a service for organizations. And so you can pick and choose different capabilities from a contact center than you ever could before, which is a really powerful way for organizations to make decisions. And it's also a very powerful way for customers to receive the best possible customer service that they could. So this is a little bit of a catch-all slide, lots of different content on here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dive into a little bit more detail for some of these different types of technologies. So the first of which is Omni-Channel customer support. And this is automated in this case because it's IBM with a technology like IBM Watson, but it could be with a wide variety of chatbot or natural language processing technologies. And so basically the premise here is the technology that we use for natural language processing, understanding how text comes in and how we should respond, as well as the same thing over voice, has matured very significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. Although you may have interacted with chatbots 3-4 years ago and been quite underwhelmed with them, the technology that is being delivered, especially production, transactional, multi-channel technologies today, are really quite astounding. And after this, I'm actually going to tell you about a specific case in Canada that's been very successful. But the premise here is a customer, irrespective of the channel that they come in on, whether it might be mobile chat, whether it might be coming in through web chat, it might be SMS, it might be a phone call, etc., they're first served by an automated customer service technology. If it's over chat, that's going to be with a chatbot technology. If it's over voice, then it's going to be with a voice bot technology, which is really chatbot and then some level of speech transcription in both directions. That basically becomes their concierge or their customer service representative for a wide array of interaction types. In some organizations and in some industries, we see implementations that can handle as much as 80% of interactions today. I've included a banking stat because that's one that we have that you can see the reference for in the bottom left-hand corner. And obviously, banking represents a lot of different customer service types of inquiries, but obviously so would energy and utilities and electricity specifically. So we're seeing from a natural language processing perspective a really high degree of success here, which is powerful. But importantly, these customer service representatives, if you will, they don't live on their own. The modern chatbot or virtual agent, it exists as a preliminary front door to actually reaching an agent and reaching the same contact center platform that you would see elsewhere on the back end side. And so ensuring that the movement of a customer from the left-hand side of the screen that you see in front of you over to the right-hand side of the screen when they can't be served by the customer service automation solution is really important. It needs to be fluid, it needs to be within the same channel, it needs to be intuitive, and the customer needs to feel as though they haven't been abandoned anywhere across the interaction. That's really important to the success. And as I said, this is an area that even just in the last few years has really matured. And one of the ways that you're seeing that most clearly is in organizations like IBM. We're able to actually sign up for agreements with customers to say, we have such high degree of confidence in the implementation of these different customer service solutions, we're going to guarantee your outcome. So if we create a chatbot for you or we create a voice bot for you, we're going to work with you to ensure that a certain amount of volume goes to the solution. And then we are going to only get paid, for example, when the chatbot or the voice bot successfully resolves the customer interaction. If it goes on through to the agent, then you know it's not something we're going to charge you for. And in doing so, organizations like IBM are actually moving to bear the risk for this transformation because we believe in it so fervently. Now let's talk about a little bit of a success story. And I think that this really helps to illustrate why this technology is so powerful at helping organizations mitigate COVID-19 conditions. So the story that I'm going to tell you today is about Purolator. Purolator, as similar to basically every organization that's been around for long enough, they started by serving their customers in obviously retail locations as well as a traditional contact center. And then they started building out digital capabilities in order to track your package, for example, provide a wide array of functionality through a digital footprint. And then might have been a little bit earlier than 2018, but in and around that time, they launched live chat to support their customers. And they did this in a way that they're able to handle chats from a variety of different at the same time, a variety of different agents. And we worked with them over the course of 2019 and 2020 to augment their live chat solution with a virtual agent leveraging our IBM technology. So in the tail end of 2019, right before the pandemic, we deployed a chatbot for them for track status and a wide variety of retail customer inquiries. And when COVID hit, as I'm sure you can imagine, Purolator being a delivery company, everyone delivering a wide variety of packages to their homes because we're not able to go into retail stores as much, they saw their volumes absolutely explode. They increased by as much as 15 times over what would normally be experienced at this time of year, and volumes that were even far in excess of what they would be seeing from a Christmas or holiday season rush. So very high volumes, and volumes that under normal conditions would cause a contact center to be extremely stressed. And so, but because we had this chatbot solution, and because it was answering inquiries before they ever arrived at customers, and we had about a successful containment rate of 75% or thereabouts for the virtual agent, we were able to extremely easily mitigate those massive volumes, to the extent that Purolator, they didn't have to do anything exorbitant in order to be able to handle those high volumes, and they dealt with it quite well. So a good example of an organization already having this technology in place and that allowing them to mitigate the COVID-19 experience. Now, the immediate question that would obviously follow is, well, what if my company didn't do that, right? What if we hadn't thought ahead and planned, because obviously none of us were planning for the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is this important now? And it's important now because what it provides you is the same thing that Purolator is experiencing, which is movement away from that one-to-one interaction of customer to agent to, instead, if it's 75% contained, 1-to-4. And so even in your everyday operation, when, for example, you have a call fluctuation or a chat fluctuation that all of a sudden spikes, or there's an outage that is experienced in your network, for example, you have that as a reason to spike. All of a sudden, when your volumes jump up by an X factor, they're then decreased by an X factor by the technology. And that's what we mean by these exponential technologies. So very powerful in terms of handling, obviously, pandemic conditions, but also in the evolving pandemic and in even our return to normal everyday interactions. Another reason that this type of customer service is really powerful is because it also provides a mechanism for delivering automation. And so many organizations, and I'm sure many of the folks who are on the phone right now are experiencing this themselves, you're focusing on more and more functionality that you can actually deliver to the hands of customers. So for example, if we have a bill coming up, if an individual has received their bill, but for some reason they have bill shock, they're wondering why their bill is so high this particular month. If they're looking to, for some reason, change their services because of personal conditions, maybe like travel, or maybe a different product is more applicable to them. There's a wide variety of use cases and experiences with which an organization would like to provide their customers with more information and engage them more directly. And if they do that, you also need a way for, if a customer receives, for example, that interaction and they want to respond back to you, for them to be able to respond. So we don't want to, by servicing our customers better, we don't want to generate more volume into the contact center, because that's going to kind of get in the way of, at the end of the day, our goal or our outcome. Instead, what we want to have is a scalable delivery mechanism for these types of notifications, for this direct to customer engagement, in a way that we can actually keep it within self-service. And chatbot technology is a hugely powerful technology to be able to do exactly that. Okay, next technology that we're going to talk about is COVID-19 and how it has really accelerated the adoption of cloud contact centers. And to a certain extent, this is seen in production solutions today, but it's also seen in terms of the strategy that organizations are employing going forward to try and make themselves more resilient. So this slide really just summarizes, for the sake of all of our understanding, how cloud contact center migration is happening. So most organizations still live on the left-hand side of this slide. They have their legacy contact centers, which are likely deployed on premises for them and are for one of the traditional big contact center vendors, you know, the Genesises, the Avayas, the Ciscos, et cetera, of the world. When they choose to migrate to, or when an organization chooses to migrate to the cloud, there are a few different options. First of all, you can lift and shift the cloud contact or the contact center onto cloud infrastructure. You can do that in a way that it's hosted by, you know, an IBM or another major cloud vendor, but still maintained by you as an organization. Or you can also have it be a managed service, but it still represents the same technology stack as you had before. So that comes with a slight advantage in terms of, you know, hopefully more economical hosting than on premises. It also comes with the same amount of rich functionality that you would have had in your legacy contact center, but it doesn't really push you any further into the cloud migration journey, and it doesn't offer you any more significant savings. The two options that you see in the top right-hand corner provide a much more significant savings potential and also provide more scalability potential. So the contact center as a service platform solutions, which is my terminology, wouldn't necessarily be general market regarded terminology, but basically these are the cloud first contact center solutions that organizations pay for on a pay-per-use model for consumption, where you go on and you configure your contact center and customize it basically in their multi-tenanted user interface. And that's really powerful because it means that, and you can have dedicated instances too, just for the sake of clarity. But that's really powerful because it allows you to have a fully cloud native solution. And it also has, as I mentioned, the pay-per-use model, which is going to be much more economical than the cloud managed services. However, where we see limitations in this model is that cloud contacts or cloud platform solutions at times can restrict functionality. So many organizations have customized, for example, something as trivial as the number of lines that an agent has on their phone, on their physical phone. Well, of course, when you move to the cloud contact center, you know, you're probably moving away from physical and you're moving to soft phone. And maybe the way that you have your lines oriented or is something that is incompatible with, for example, the platform solutions. There are lots of those kind of customizations that become more challenging. And so in addition to that middle area, which is the fastest way to get up and rolling and also generally, you know, very economical, There's also what I've started to call the programmatic cloud contact center solutions. And so these are technologies that, as opposed to just simply going onto a multi-tenanted user interface and configuring, you're actually required to do some level of development. And vendors like Twilio, like Google, like Amazon, if you're familiar with Amazon Connect, will offer different point capabilities for contact centers to be able to deliver different types of experiences. But an individual will have to then customize and develop these technologies in a way that is going to meet their expectations. So these are the three different types of migrations. Now, you may ask the question, well, why does that matter, especially in the context of COVID-19? The first reason is that it has allowed organizations to create rapid relief contact centers when they are overloaded on their own contact center. We saw this in a wide variety of industries. We saw this a ton in provinces in Canada, as well as federal organizations and municipalities, where all of a sudden the call volumes were so astronomically high, individuals were being repurposed from their everyday job to become less senior agents based on very quick training. But the actual call center infrastructure itself couldn't handle these inquiries. And so organizations started standing up these temporary parallel contact centers that would receive certain types of interactions and would service customers in a way to ensure that volumes and wait times weren't astronomical. So this level of flexibility, and in particular, the ability to stand up one of these contact centers in a matter of days or a matter of weeks, is a really, really powerful way that organizations now have an added level of flexibility. But even more interestingly, and as we move on to the next slide, it's also helped organizations realize that the traditional contact center of the past or of the current, which is large monolithic technology with a major contact center vendor, there's an alternative to it. And the alternative is essentially a cloud contact center set of capabilities that are evolving and growing over time to meet your needs, growing when it comes to the channels that they serve, the complexity of how they're dispositioning different types of interactions, the desktop technology that might be leveraged, et cetera. And they're scaling in a way, and their baseline capabilities from a reporting and an auditability and a compliance perspective offer the same base capabilities that your general contact center provider would create as well. So as opposed to multi-month journey of standing up a traditional contact center and deploying all the capabilities that you need to do, these new technologies will enable you to very rapidly, and I give the example here, this is kind of a visual that we put together for Twilio Flex, which is one of those technologies, which will allow you to stand up a contact center in a matter of days or short weeks, and allow you to iteratively add new capabilities to it in order to build out your functionality. So this presents a little bit of a different approach when it comes to contact center technologies more generally, and also adapts itself well to the way that a lot of organizations are making business decisions now, which is more iterative, more agile, and more outcome-based than traditionally it was. So that's a few concepts within cloud contact centers. The last thing that I want to spend some time talking about, and then I'm going to finish with the story of one contact center that we were working with this year. But I want to talk a little bit about automation as well. So another way that we can move in this scalable, exponential way, in addition to AI and in addition to cloud, which obviously will scale horizontally as much as you might like it to, is by automating more functions within the contact center as well. And this can mean a variety of different things. First of all, this can mean different types of desktop automation, and all of you in this technology space will understand that well. How do we take the activities, the repeatable tasks that an agent is doing on a day-to-day basis, on a call-by-call basis, and automate those specifically in order to reduce average handle time and allow agents to take more calls? That's very powerful. But there's also back office automations. Can we unlock more automated functionality to the front office by automating the back office, so that when someone calls in with a particular issue, it's not a service request that needs to be created and then a follow-up call that might need to be performed, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, it is a fully automated end-to-end process that can get executed by the click of a button by an agent. Now, that at times can be more non-trivial than I would make it seem from a technological perspective, but really looking at those use cases on a use case by use case basis to understand what's the value, what's the cost of not doing so, and automate is really, really powerful. And then the final one that I would mention here too is the automated engagement. That's what I was referring to on one of those chatbot slides, where as you automate these back office processes, you can then reach out, automate in an automated fashion to your customers. For example, if it's a service ticket of some kind and you want to send them an SMS, or you can tell them that service has been restored through SMS, whatever it might be. Those types of automations are extremely powerful in not only obviously delivering a great customer service, but also as the number of inquiries rise and as the complexities of those inquiries rise, ensuring that it's not a human at the end of the day who is dealing with all these interactions. Instead, it is an automated system that it doesn't matter whether there's 10, 20, 1,000 coming through, it's going to be able to handle that volume well. And when you start to look at this technology space in that manner, what you start to see is basically an integration and an ecosystem of integrated automation capabilities. So you have, cognitive or AI technology that's going to do learning, et cetera. It's going to integrate directly with customers, with agents, et cetera. But you're going to leverage, different types of intelligent workflow, call center analytics, virtual agents, voice of the customer technology, et cetera, in a cohesive way that's going to better serve your customers, and then overall is going to provide your contact center with more resilience and the ability to handle spikes and adverse conditions like COVID-19 more effectively. So as a closing concept, I wanted to share a bit of a story with you. This story is about a Canadian company, and it's a company that I'm not going to disclose, but it's an organization that experienced earlier in this year and even into the tail end of last year some significant challenges from a contact center perspective that drove their contact center operations basically to deteriorate from an efficiency perspective by about a 50% margin, as in they were handling about 50% of the calls that they could handle. And so I've talked about a lot of technologies today, but if any of these technologies are going to be successful, what's required in order to do that is a holistic approach to look at the value of each opportunity and how feasible it is, how applicable it is to the contact center, et cetera, and to deliver those technologies with deep integration into the line of business or the business unit that it relates to. And so this slide really just depicts the way that we engaged with that organization in a multifaceted, holistic approach, leveraging contact center technology, self-service technologies like bots, as I just mentioned, contact center operations, performance, real-time adherence, et cetera, automation of the front and back office, and contact center insights in order to provide that organization with extremely significant results. Like we're talking 33% and almost back to the 50% improvement of their contact center over a matter of months in improving their performance. So very significant results. And although this actually happened before the COVID-19 crisis, this became a template for us as a consulting organization to look at contact center technologies not as simply an issue with routing, or not as simply an issue with IVR capacity, or not simply an issue with whatever it might be as an individual component, but as a holistic set of technologies, capabilities, and operations that need to be considered for any form of contact center change. So I wanted to leave off on this a little bit. Each of these, you've obviously seen this slide before, each of these technologies, they present a unique opportunity for organizations not only to adapt to COVID-19, but to leapfrog into the future. I think that each of you on this call really need to see this time in the contact center space as a unique time. The importance of the contact center, the attention that it's gotten, et cetera, is quite unique in terms of 10 or 5 years in the past. It's an opportunity for all of us to take a significant step back and say, if we can change our contact center, if we can really own its future and leverage exponential technologies and emergent technologies in order for us to be able to deliver a better future, a more resilient future, and obviously a great future for our customers. What technologies should we be leveraging to do that? What delivery models should we be leveraging to do that? And obviously, what partners should we be leveraging to do that? And with that, I think we're just about right on 144. If you have any questions, there's the question and answer component of the GoToWebinar UI that you can leverage, and I'd be really happy to take any of those questions now.
Wow, that's terrific, Dan. Rob. The information that you've just shared with us is absolutely remarkable. Just a reminder, if you do have a question, just go into the chat mode on your webinar screen, and we'll get to that right away. We have learned an awful lot this afternoon, Rob, about what you're doing at IBM. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Really remarkable. We learned about the fact that in COVID, the calls continue to roll, and in fact, even in an increased way. We learned about bots, intelligent routing and overflow, asynchronous versus synchronous messaging, continued growth of the channels, exponential technologies, creating and maintaining your top agent, teamwork through hybrid AI, and the list goes on. It's really an ongoing and changing environment that we're dealing with. So again, ask your questions, and we'd be happy to field them. We do have some in at this point, Rob, and if you don't mind, one of the questions is, how in the omni-channel world do you ensure consistency of the answer, as there are so many different technologies involved?
So that's a great question, and it actually alludes to one of the biggest challenges, both from an agent or assisted service space, as well as an automated or AI assisted space, and that is managing content. And so there are a couple of different strategies that are really important to leverage. The first of which is, you have to understand that whether it's an agent or whether it's a bot, they're trained kind of in similar ways. And in addition to trained in similar ways, they need to be going through the continual content and answer update process that should exist within every organization. So for example, when policy and procedures change, and those are published, for example, on the website, where is the source of truth associated with that, both from a technology perspective as well as just from an operations perspective? And then how, from a business process point of view, how does that get cascaded down to our autonomous bots and to our agents? Obviously, agents, it would be through ongoing training, it would be through communication methods, etc. For our bots, we can actually start to leverage a much more, and this is again part of the exponential nature of their scalability, we can actually start to leverage the content sources themselves. And so an emerging field, and a field that is maturing in the bot space, is if an answer unit changes on a website, how do we ensure that we are ingesting that content from the website in a way that is going to be able to serve it up automatically? So you don't need to worry about the same level of authoring and content oversight. It may be something that is supervised, as in an administrator or some dedicated trainers can answer it, or it may be something that's totally unsupervised.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that the cloud contact centers can be spun up pretty quick. Did I hear you correctly? You say you could do this in a matter of days or weeks? How do you do that?
So for both of the programmable as well as for the cloud contact center platform as a service technologies, you can spin them up quite quickly. There are standard configurations for lots of the traditional, Genesys and NICE and 5.9s vendors that you can basically go on and say, I want to stand up this configuration with these agents, et cetera, and deploy extremely quickly in a matter of days, or more likely a week or two, that type of technology. And then similarly with the programmatic contact centers, there's a whole ton of accelerators that have been built to say, okay, I want to be able to deploy 100 agents. These 100 agents are going to have these particular profiles. Here's how I'm going to deliver the calls, basic workflow to actually deliver those calls and stand it up. So it's quite it's quite a paradigm shift from the traditional contact center deployment model, which is why that technology was able to be used so effectively to rapidly stand up for an organization. Now, it comes with a caveat, of course, which is that the ability to integrate with those technologies at times can be a little bit more challenging. What I mean by that is, if you want, for example, to have your on-premises systems for transactional functionality or for functional use cases be accessed by them, well, you all of a sudden have a hybrid cloud architecture. So you need to be integrating your cloud-based contact center with your on-premises services. But obviously, that's something that is very routine now, especially when it comes to digital technology, and it's something that's easily surmounted by organizations.
Great, thank you. And to our viewers, if you have a question, you have access to Rob Dunlap, who's a partner with IBM, and obviously demonstrating not only his personal expertise, but the expertise that IBM can bring to bear. So if you've got a question, please feel free. The next one has come in, Rob. Organizations are ramping up on the COVID front. Are you seeing organizations stepping back from their COVID response, or are they just rolling it forward now?
We haven't seen anyone step back yet, or at least not in a significant manner, but we have seen a check step over the summer. So a lot of the services, especially in the public space, and a lot of the handling of questions and answers around how to get tested, for example, for municipalities and for provinces, the volumes associated with that were absolutely astronomical when they started. A lot of organizations, especially those different health departments, basically said, we're going to throw a whole bunch of different solutions, digital technologies, contact center technology solutions, virtual agents, et cetera, to try and support our customers. We're now in a position where there's all these different capabilities that are out in the market. Obviously, over the summer, kind of everything stayed status quo. We're entering, what appears to be a bit of a second wave, and so I don't expect to see a huge amount of scaling back yet, but certainly a rationalization process to say which of these technologies are working well, which ones aren't being used as much as they should be, and then where are the continued gaps where customers, citizens, et cetera, aren't properly being served by whatever organization we're referring to. And how do we then try and adapt to those customers and their evolving needs?
Great. We've heard a lot about a number of chatbots going public since the pandemic hit, and quite frankly, that can cause all sorts of problems because it's madly off in all directions just to get something in. So, how successful have they been?
It's a good question. There's a whole spectrum of capabilities when it comes to chatbot technology. There are hundreds of 10, 20 question and answer chatbots that exist today where you can go in, you can ask your question, you're going to get an answer, but it's not really going to do that much for you. And so while they have been very successful in providing another way to give content to customers, citizens, et cetera, and they've also been great as essentially, one other tool to demonstrate that we as organizations, we really care and we're doing all that we can to support you. They won't be a long-term solution to the resiliency of contact centers generally. But these other types of chatbots that we're starting to see being more pervasive, which are emphasizing transactional or functional use cases, things that are actually going to do something for you, or are answering complex questions. I mean, a question like, why is my bill so high is quite a complex question to answer. Similarly, why hasn't my package arrived on time, which would be a pure later question. And there are about hundreds of sensors that could be involved in that, also quite complex. And so the chatbot technology is now at a place where it can actually answer those questions, and in doing so, deliver a much higher degree of functionality and outcome to the organization, as well as good quality customer service.
It feels like this is your avatar Dave speaking to you, Rob, today. It's quite remarkable. Hey, the next one that's come in, we hear a lot about chatbots, and you were just talking about those, but also about RPA or robotic process automation, or process bots, I guess. What exactly is the difference between them, and how do they interact with the contact center?
It's a great question. So chatbots are really focused on understanding the natural language of an inquiry, how it comes in, and then understanding how should we respond to that. And so there's statistical mathematics and deep learning in the case of some technologies to understand, okay, well, what have you asked and how should we respond? And that's all the sphere of the chatbot. Anything that happens behind that, in terms of executing something, in terms of retrieving data, in terms of even a UI functionality, That's all more traditional technologies that integrate with the chatbot directly. RPA, or automation technology, is really interesting as well because it offers the same autonomy or autonomousness, I guess, if that's a word, that the chatbot does, but for an executed process or workflow. So basically what it is like it's like a macro or a computer-based automation set of activities that can take place that a user could do, but instead this automation script is going to do in order to be able to automate a process end to end. And even moving a layer up from that, and what this technology space has started to talk about now, is not so much focusing on the process, but actually focusing on the workflow. How do you look at, for example, a customer move end to end and all the different interactions that are required, and automate the full workflow? Or how do you do that for example, some form of a field technician activity, which is generally quite a bit more complicated? And so how do you look at that end-to-end process as a workflow and automate it? And so all of that is the sphere of process-based automation, workflow automation, or RPA.
Wow, we've heard a lot of information here today, and I'm noting that we're approaching the top of the hour. Rob, we certainly do very much appreciate you taking the time to share your personal expertise and the expertise that IBM can bring to bear. And to all of our viewers, if you're dealing in a call center environment and you've got some questions, there will be an opportunity to reach out to Rob and IBM should you have any questions offline. So with that, Rob, I would like to thank you and invite you to, you can go off camera now, and we'll just do the quick wrap on this. So thanks for your time. So our next CEA Corporate Partner Conversation Series webinars will be held on October the 6th is the next one. Siemens Canada will be presenting Utility Distributed Energy Resources, Adoption with the Energy System Platform. And then following that, on October the 8th, Kubra will be presenting Innovation in Payments, such things as Amazon, Alexa, Facebook, Text, and more. So you won't want to miss those particular sessions. All of CEA's future events are available, and webinars can be found in our monthly newsletter, Current Affairs, or they can be found online at electricity.ca. And we'd welcome you to check those locations out. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.